Hello everyone, my name is John, I'm the Geeky Fanboy, and it's this time of the year again where I look back at all the movies, TV shows and video games I have consumed this year instead of actually doing something useful. But hey, we all need our escapist stuff now and then. So this time we are talking about my top 5 video games that I played in 2021. Now, that means that not all of these games will have been released in 2021. Some of them are, but some of them I just happened to play for the first time this year. So keep this in mind, and as always, at the very end of the video there are going to be some honorable mentions, but for now that's enough for the introduction, so let's go. The first game I would like to talk about, I've actually talked about before in my year in review for 2020, namely Dragon Ball Z Kakarot. Now, last time I talked about this, I had just started playing the game. I was like, okay, this looks quite promising. I think this might become a highlight for 2021. And indeed, Dragon Ball Z Kakarot was the first big game I played in 2021. And what's even more positively surprising is that I actually 100%ed this game. Because I almost never 100% games. I'm like, okay, I'm through with the story. Like that's it. I'm done with the game. Like I very rarely take the time to finish other stuff like subplots, sub storylines, or do the maximum leveling up. Or I also very rarely do all of the achievements because I just can't be bothered. I'm just not that type of gamer. But with Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, I had so much fun playing that game. That I took the time and the effort and the work and put the hours into the game and 100%ed it. Also because the achievements, at least the ones like the Steam achievements, weren't that difficult. Like some of them required a bit of effort, a bit of time, but they were very much doable. And I enjoyed the game so much that I was willing to put the work into the game to actually 100% it. So yeah, Dragon Ball Z Kakarot was so much fun. I'm a huge fan of the original anime. I watched it back in the day when I was a kid together with my brother. And this game is just everything I could have wanted from a Dragon Ball Z game. Especially since I'm normally not really into RPGs or JRPGs. They have to sort of be very specific for me to like them. And with Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, it just worked. Because, I know the story beforehand, so I know that I will enjoy the story and that I will enjoy the characters because I'm familiar with them. And Dragon Ball Z Kakarot just manages so well to transport the story, from the anime into this video game form. And I just love the fact that it's open world. It feels so great to just, that you get to play as your favorite characters from the anime and you just get to fly around in Dragon Ball Z world and interact with all the people and go on, story missions and, from the anime, or you go and do some strange anime nonsense in a sub-storyline. And it's just so much fun. If, like me, you're a huge fan when it comes to Dragon Ball stuff in general, or especially Dragon Ball Z, you're definitely going to enjoy it. I've recently started playing the DLCs, so I've just gotten through the Super Saiyan God stuff with Golden Frieza and everything. That one was fun. I'm still about to start the Trunks DLC, but that one looks so much fun, and that was one of my favorite story aspects of the original anime, seeing where future Trunks comes from, what happened to him and all that. Something like that's a DLC. But yeah, it's just basically a dream come true. It's like childhood dreams coming true playing this video game, which is why Dragon Ball Z Kakarot was my first video game highlight of 2021. The second game I would like to talk about is an indie game, which I think a bunch of people will know at this point, namely Dorfromantik. Now, how do you describe this game? It's a very relaxing, very chill game. It's definitely very, very different from, I would argue, all of the other games that I'm going to name in this video. Dorfromantik is, it doesn't have a story, it doesn't require any, great puzzling or anything like that. It's really just chill. It's kind of like this Settlers of Catan game board you have with those different tiles, and you just put the tiles down and try to make them connect in the right way so you gain higher points, and you're just trying to make a nice little village, a dorf as it's called in German, which is where the name for this game comes from. And that's all. That's it. That's pretty much it. It's just you have these tiles, you put them down. It looks nice. It looks pretty, and it's so satisfying when you are able to connect all of the tiles correctly. But it's also not frustrating if you don't manage to do it quote unquote correctly, because you might just be out for I want to create a nice looking map, and then you just do that regardless of whether or not the tiles connect correctly. So you can just go and do that, and you can repeat it over and over again. I think they've also added a creative mode this time where you can just, create a nice looking village landscape without bothering about points or anything like that. And it's just so relaxing, also because the soundtrack for the game is so good. It's super chill, you have some animal noises in the background, like cows and birds and stuff like that, a bit of a breeze, and you have some trees rustling in the background. It's just some very chill, low-key, indie music vibes throughout the entire game. And you can play it as often as you like, there's no pressure, nothing. If you feel okay, I don't want to finish the village I'm building right now, you can either stop and come back later, or you can restart the village you're currently building. And it's different every single time. Every village you build looks different. No playthrough looks the same. And it's just a wonderful game for just playing in between. If you're okay, I have 30 minutes of free time, let's just go and play a session of Dorfromantik, you can just go and do that. Or it's also wonderful for just doing, if you want to do stuff while listening to something in the background. For example, I'm not really a podcast person, but if I, for some reason, do happen to listen to a podcast or something similar, I need to do something, I can't just sit down and listen. But Dorfromantik is perfect because it doesn't require too much of your attention, so you can just sort of play this while other stuff is going on in the background. And it's really relaxing to just sort of have something to do while maybe you need to pay attention to something else. But you can also just sit down and play this game for a good hour or so. And it's great that you can play in really short bursts, but you could also just sit down and play it throughout the entire night, because it's just so chill and you get to be so creative with it. So yeah, Dorfromantik was definitely sort of my indie chill highlight for 2021. The third game I would like to talk about is the third game in a series that I've spoken about before, and I actually only played it for the first time this year, namely Danganronpa III. Now don't worry, I'm not gonna spoil anything, there's not going to be any spoilers. I've spoken about, like I said, about the Danganronpa games before in the video essay, and surprisingly enough, I've only played Danganronpa 3 for the first time this year. I know it came out a while ago. For some reason I hadn't really gotten around to playing it up until now. When did it come out? 2017 or something? I started playing it with a friend, but for some reason we stopped playing and we didn't get back together again to play it. And then I happened to finally buy the game for myself in late 2020. So I finally played through it this year, and oh my god, this game broke me. I just love what Danganronpa does, how it always tries to top itself with every new game, major game, main game in the series. Because this is definitely the biggest Danganronpa main game. It's so much longer than the first, and definitely even longer than the second game. Arguably, maybe a bit too long in some places. It takes a while for the game to really get going. The prologue alone takes a lot of time. But at least this time the pacing works a bit better, because even though the game is longer, the game uses that time to really develop basically all of the students and not just highlight a couple of them, but no, everyone gets detailed characterization, which makes the deaths in this third game, I think, so much more impactful. Even though not this game had some characters I really liked, and this game also had characters I really hated. But I think that's what makes this game so great, because the cast of the third game is balanced out so well, that there are characters that are so endearing and so enjoyable, and you just immediately fall in love with them, but then there are also characters that are written so well that you just have to hate them or dislike them. Or even if they're meant to be disliked, they're still intriguing to a lot of people, and I think that's what this game does so well, how it plays with your expectations for the story, and especially also for those characters. Are some of them good, are some of them bad, are they in between, can you even do stuff? It does play a lot with expectations, how you expect a story or the characters to work in a Danganronpa game, and it takes those stereotypes or those expectations you've had in the previous games and just completely throws them out the window. And it just does some stuff throughout the story that I honestly did not see coming, and I cried so much during the second half of the game. There were parts and bits in V3 that I honestly broke me. I was crying, I felt like I was losing my mind, because I just didn't know where the story was going to go, and I didn't know what to expect, and I didn't know who I could trust, who was on my side, who was my friend, and I don't want this person to die, but then I don't want the other person to die as well, all those kinds of things. And then it ends on a note which I would argue is quite controversial within the Danganronpa fandom. I'm not going to tell you what happens, but for me personally, even though it broke my brain, I thought it was so interesting to see what they decided to do, and that they had the guts to go there and say, this is what we're doing and this is real. And I liked it. For me, it wasn't a bad ending, and I enjoy the fascination that comes with that ending, what it implies, and how, it plays with expectations, and you could sort of interpret it one way, but you can also interpret it the other way. So, I'm not sure if Danganronpa 3 is my favourite one. Maybe it's either Danganronpa 2 or V3. It's hard to say, also because V3 feels so much different from the other two games, but this one was definitely a highlight, and I was so glad I finally got to play through Danganronpa 3 this year. The next game I would like to talk about is a stand-in for a whole trilogy of games I played for the first time this year, namely the Zero Escape games. And I decided to go with my favourite game in the series as a highlight, namely 9 Hours, 9 Persons, 9 Doors. Now, I've recently spoken about the Zero Escape games in a character ranking video, so I'm not going to say too much here, but I decided to go with 999 as my favourite because that was my introduction into the series, and I went into the series basically knowing nothing about this. I just knew, it's made by the same company who also worked on Danganronpa, which was the main reason why I decided to buy the games and play through them. I was like, okay, it's also about people dying, it's a life and death game, okay, it's escape room puzzle games. Well, I was like, I'm not too sure about that since I'm not really good with puzzle games, but I was like, okay, I'm trusting this, and the story's supposed to be good, and the characters are supposed to be interesting. So I went into it not knowing a whole lot about it, and I was pleasantly surprised, especially by this first game by 999, which I would argue is, probably my favourite game within the trilogy. And what it does so well is, again, similar to Danganronpa 3, it plays with your expectation as to how you expect a video game to work, how you expect a simple narrative to work. I don't want to say too much, but I think it's not too much of a spoiler to say that the Zero Escape games play a lot with this idea of repetition, repeated playthroughs, how game over works while playing a video game, and they use those mechanics in such a unique way I had never seen before, and that really hit home hard for me while playing the first game. Because by the second and third game you're like, okay, I know where this is sort of going, but with the first game you really especially if, like me, you didn't really know anything about the game before starting up, I was so surprised by how they decided to do this. I was like, oh wow, they're actually taking, familiar gaming mechanics or common gaming mechanics and work them into the narrative of their story or into, the gameplay. Or more like the series becomes quite weird and over the top, philosophical and sci-fi-ish as the series goes on, which is why I think I prefer the first game, because the first game is still a bit more grounded, and yes, it does have like the pseudoscience stuff, but it doesn't lean too heavily into it as the second and third game do. And the first game feels a bit more grounded, a bit more level-headed, not as exaggerated yet. It's really just like this cast of characters who are trapped on this ship, and they just have to solve a bunch of puzzle escape rooms to get out, and that's it. On the way, they sort of have to decide, okay, how we're doing this, who is going to die, who stays behind, does someone need to stay behind, who's actually behind all of this, and you see all of these similar things that would also later come up in Danganronpa games, like, who do you trust, who do you distrust, who's lying, who's telling the truth, who do you decide to go with, all of those kinds of things. And like I said, I'm not really someone who enjoys puzzle games, but that's mostly because I'm not very good with puzzle games, so you might argue that I'm not the right person for these kinds of games. But this is why maybe also I like 999 the most, because the puzzles in 999 are doable. They are not too easy, but they're also not too hard, like in some of the future games. So I enjoyed them in this, and they also serve as, anchor points for introducing plot-relevant or character-relevant information that doesn't feel too overblown yet, as it would later feel in, the second and the third game. And I think also the cast of the first game is the most interesting and the best one, with like the right mixture of, weird characters, but also grounded characters, funny characters, serious characters. And there's a lot to like here. And even though I maybe didn't enjoy the second and third game as much as the first one, I'm still glad that I started the series with 999 and introduced me to a series I thought was very, very interesting and did a lot of unique stuff that I hadn't seen before. So 9 hours, 9 persons, 9 doors is definitely a highlight for me this year. And the fifth video game I would like to talk about was a new one in a series of games I hold very, very dear, namely Life is Strange: True Colors. I was so excited to finally be able to play a new Life is Strange game. I'm a huge fan of the series. I've played every single game. Like the minute they came out, I would play the new ones, and I was admittedly like a little bit nervous, because while I did enjoy Life is Strange 2, it was, for me personally, definitely more of a step down from Life is Strange 1, even from Before the Storm. But when I watched the trailer for True Colors and saw, okay, we're going to a completely new location, new cast of characters, the characters are a bit older and we have new powers, new themes, I was really excited to go into it, and I was definitely not disappointed. I was blown away once again by Life is Strange, like how they managed to create these wonderful little charming settings with the small town, and introduce you to this cast of characters within the town, how you how you get close to them, how you find out about their lives, what's going on in their lives, and how they're all affected by those different things that happen throughout the story. All the while you're playing as Alex, who might be my new favorite protagonist in Life is Strange. Like Max was my favorite, used to be my favorite, but Alex might take that place now. Maybe also because I just connect more with her powers, which is all about emotions, and that she can feel other people's emotions when they're really, really strong, and that they affect her as well. She sort of takes over some of those feelings, and so much so that she acts out when she feels angry because someone else in her vicinity feels angry as well, and how she can occasionally read people's minds when they have really strong emotions. and I just connected with that on a personal level, and it was so interesting and fun and endearing to see how this story unfolds, because unlike the first one or unlike the second one, it didn't feel like as big, because in the first game you have, this whole Arcadia Bay storm thingy, and in the second game it's all about crossing the border because someone died. And in True Colors it's not like that. It's really just like this small town story where a tragedy happens, and you just get to see how everyone in the city deals with it. But at the end of the game, it didn't feel like, you decided who gets to live and who gets to die, or like nothing like that. The final decision, which I'm not gonna say which one. I'll give you a spoiler warning in a minute to tell you what some of my choices were. But I like that the final decision wasn't that big of a thing. Like in retrospect, if you compare it to the other games, it was much more of a personal story. Like, this is probably why I also enjoy True Colors more than any of the other games in the series. It just feels much more, it's on a smaller scale and it's more personal, and that's something I personally prefer. Which doesn't mean that I dislike the previous games. I very much enjoy Life is Strange 2, and Life is Strange 1 was for a long time my favorite game in the series. But now with True Colors, it's just that I connect more with the themes throughout the game on a personal level. That I like the chemistry between like the main characters. I like the story that unfolds. I'm just a huge fan of the small town setting where you just get to like really intimately connect with everyone you interact with. And speaking of which, here is a short little spoiler warning. I'm going to talk about some of my choices, of the main choices I took in the game, in case you're curious. So here's a timestamp in case you want to skip the spoilers. So here you go. Okay, so talking about some of my major choices, I decided to romance Ryan, because Ryan is just the most adorable ranger man in the whole world. The funny thing is, I played this game together with a friend, and we both went into this game completely expecting what would definitely call the romance Steph, right? Because, I mean, Steph was cool. And then Ryan appeared, and just immediately after like his first 1 or 2 appearances, we were like, oh no, I think Ryan is stealing our heart, and that's how it happened. We decided to romance Ryan, and Ryan is just such a sweetheart. I love his relationship with Alex, how he's so protective of her, and you just feel like you're safe with him, and he is looking out for her while also giving her space if she needs it. I was just really into that. And while I also like Steph is a great character, and she was one of my favorite characters from Before the Storm. I also like it's all what happens when you romance Steph. That relationship is also cool, but I could just connect more with Ryan. And at the very end of the game, when you get to decide, what do you want to do? Do you stay in the town, or do you leave and become a musician? I decided together with my friend who I played this with, we decided to, no, we're going to stay with Ryan, and we're going to stay in town, because I felt like this is what the story was about, Alex finding a home, building a family. So I felt that this was sort of the core message, and now she gets to just be there, be with someone who loves her and who she loves, and she's built a home for herself and knows these people there, and she just gets to stay. So that those were sort of like my big decisions throughout the game. But yeah, Life is Strange True Colors was definitely like the big highlight for 2021. I can't wait to see where they go next. The Life is Strange series. I think Life is Strange True Colors takes the #1 spot for my favorite game in the series, because I just connected with the themes and the characters on a more personal level in this one. And what else can I say? Go and play True Colors. And as promised, there are going to be a couple of honorable mentions, and the first one is Danganronpa Ultra Despair Girls. Yes, another Danganronpa game that I haven't played yet, and I played for the first time this year. Now, this is one of the spin-off games. It's not like a proper visual novel like the main games. It does have a lot of visual novel elements, but it's more like a 3D adventure shooter-ish kind of game. with Toko and with Makoto's sister as the protagonists. And I was a little skeptical about this one because I'm not sure how I feel about, going into the spin-off story. Well, I like the characters, and a lot of things in the story are weird, and some of the newly introduced characters are weird. But overall, I had a lot of fun with it. I did not expect to like it as much as I did by the end. And similar to like V3, there was some stuff in there where I was like, okay, this is blowing my mind. This is wrinkling my brain. I don't know how I feel about this. And I definitely would not disregard this game. Like, if you enjoy Danganronpa and have played through the main games and you are unsure whether or not you should try out Ultra Spegas, definitely go and do that. Don't worry about the action adventure bits. It's still like half of it is still visual novel elements, and it's not that challenging. And I had a lot of fun with it, and it gives a lot of context to some of the stuff that happens in the Danganronpa story. So Ultra Spegas was definitely worthy of an honorable mention. My second honorable mention is a game I don't think many people have heard of, and it's called Dance of Death, Dulac and Fae. Now, this one is a not quite visual novel, kind of click and point adventure game, which is not about solving puzzles, but it's mostly about the story. And what I like about this, what got me curious about this, is that it mixes two very interesting fictional universes. Namely, it's about the story of Jack the Ripper and the characters from the Arthurian legend. And it's set in the 19th century London, and you play as Lancelot, who, sort of makes his way through history and comes to London and finds out about, that prostitutes are being murdered, and he gets caught up in this investigation. Meanwhile, he's going around with Faye, who is one of the more magical female characters from the Arthurian legend. She is a dog, can talk, and she is his companion, and there seems to have been some kind of previous relationship with them. It's all a little bit difficult, and they get caught up in this crime story that is so famous. And you play as these characters, mostly like these two, finding out, what happens throughout the story, how do people die, what happens to some of the prostitutes. You also do get to discover the story of one of the prostitutes. You get to play as her and see what, day-to-day life for Victorian working class was like, especially for women. And there are also other characters from the Arthurian legends that you do not expect to pop up throughout the game, and it's not perfect. It's a bit messy, and not all of the stuff always works as you want it to work, and sometimes it can be a bit tricky to figure out what the game wants from you. But nevertheless, I just thought the whole premise was so weirdly interesting and unique in a way. I was immediately fascinated. And they put some stuff in there that you do not expect them to address, like I said, like working class Victorian people, what was life like for them, especially like for the prostitutes. You get to learn a lot of stuff about Arthurian legends. Lancelot is a fun character. Also, Lancelot is bisexual in this. That's fun. And this is so much wacky and interesting stuff in this. I was immediately like, okay, this is weird, but I like where this is going. So if you're into, point and click, story-based adventure games with a bit of like puzzle solving, I could definitely recommend Dance of Death. The next honorable mention is a famous one, namely Alan Wake. Yes, I've played through Alan Wake for the first time this year, and I was quite surprised by how much I liked it, because I was nervous going into it, because I was like, okay, the story and everything seems interesting, and I know a lot of people like Alan Wake, but I'm not very good at shooting in video games. I wish I was better at those kinds of games, like Resident Evil style gameplay and stuff like that, but the fact of the matter is I'm not very good at it, even though I would like to be, which is why I was nervous going into Alan Wake. And yes, I did have my fair share of problems with the combat and everything, which is probably mostly my fault. But regardless of that, Alan Wake was a lot of fun. I liked how it played around with, the author and an unreliable narrator. What does the game show you? What does the story actually do? What is happening inside Alan's mind? What is happening in reality? How much can a creator, a writer, influence the world around him? It plays around a lot with the idea of fiction, the idea of the writer, and what they can create. And overall, while I was a little bit disappointed with where the story was going towards the end, I enjoyed playing as Alan Wake, as the character, seeing, since he's a writer and I'm also a writer, but he's also sort of like this pretentious, stereotypical idea of a writer. It was kind of fun seeing how the game would develop him as a person, and as someone, like I said, who's not very good at shooting action style kind of gameplay. I think it works mostly well, even if you're not that familiar with that kind of gameplay, because the story itself is interesting enough, and it's this right mixture of it's crime, it's drama, it's thriller, but it's also like supernatural horror-esque in some places, and plays a lot with like Alan Wake's psyche, the character psyche. So overall, knowing that this is sort of like a modern day classic, I had a lot of fun with Alan Wake. And the last honorable mention is State of Mind. Now, I came across this by pure coincidence. I was just browsing Steam, looking for, stuff that's on sale, maybe I could do with like a new video game, and, I'm not really into the idea of playing Cyberpunk 2077 at the moment. I was like, okay, but I'm still kind of into like the whole sci-fi, cyberpunk themes, and I like visual novels, so I came across State of Mind. And State of Mind is this I'm not sure if it's like an indie game, probably. It sort of has like this polygon-ish pixel art style, and it's mostly just you walking around as the main characters and interacting with what the world gives you, what's going on in the story. And it's split between these two characters, one of whom is a journalist, sort of rough and tough, and he is all like sort of anti-androids, anti-robots, that kind of stuff. And the other character seems to live in this more perfect technology world with like a happy home life. So sort of the complete antithesis to what the other character is going through. And throughout the story, you're finding out how these characters connected. Are they maybe related? Are their lives similar? How are they similar? How are they not similar? While at the same time, of course, it addresses themes of artificial intelligence. How do we live in a more modernized world? Do we sort of go with, okay, humans are still human, but we're also giving artificial intelligence and androids and robots more of an individuality? Or are we going against this? Where it's also a lot about transhumanism, that kind of idea that comes up a lot in cyberpunk stories, where just sort of like it's a bit of a bleak idea of the future, especially since it's also set in, or half of it is set in this futuristic or cyberpunk apocalypse world of Berlin, which also plays again with some ideas of east-west ideas that we're used to from the Cold War, especially like in Eastern Germany, in Berlin. Some of those ideas are coming through there as well, and I think it manages to address typical cyberpunk themes in a very interesting way, and manages to tell an interesting story with these two characters. And even though one character might start out as a bit of an asshole, you kind of connect with him and see why he is the way he is, and the other character is more like seems to be perfect, but then starts showing cracks in his personality as the story goes on. You do also get to make a lot of choices throughout the story. It's mostly about the narrative and you interacting with other characters and sort of making choices throughout the story. And I thought it was an interesting way to explore common sci-fi and cyberpunk themes. So if you're on the lookout for an interesting cyberpunk story, State of Mind is definitely my recommendation. Okay, that's it for my top 5 video games I played in 2021. Do let me know in the comments down below what some of your favorite games were that you played this year. Do tell me of those, and if you have any thoughts or comments on some of the video games I've spoken about, do tell me more. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't done it already. And I'll see all of you very soon. Goodbye.